Hi everyone and welcome to this YouTube channel. In this video, we're going to talk about 13 plane crashes that changed aviation forever. 1. Grand Canyon TLA Flight 2 and United Airlines Flight 718. In the skies above the Grand Canyon on June 30, 1956, two planes that had recently taken off from Los Angeles International Airport of United Airlines, Douglas DC-7, headed to Chicago in a Trans World Airlines Lockheed L-1049 Super Constellation on its way to Kansas City collided. All 128 passengers and crew aboard both flights were killed. The accident spurred a $250 million upgrade of the air traffic control AT system, which cost serious money in those days. 2. Portland United Airlines Flight 173. On December 28, 1978, United Flight 173, a DC-8 approaching Portland, Oregon, with 181 passengers, circled near the airport for an hour as the crew tried in vain to sort out a landing gear problem. Although gently warned of the rapidly diminishing fuel supply by the flight engineer on board, the captain, later described by one investigator as an arrogant SOB, waited too long to begin his final approach. The DC-8 ran out of fuel and crashed in a suburb, killing 10. 3. Cincinnati Air Canada Flight 797. The first signs of trouble on Air Canada 797, a DC-9 flying at 33,000 feet en route from Dallas to Toronto on June 2, 1983, with a wisp of smoke wafting out of the rear lavatory. Soon, thick black smoke started to fill the cabin, and the plane began an emergency descent. Barely able to see the instrument panel because of the smoke, the pilot landed the plane in Cincinnati. But shortly after the doors and emergency exits were opened, the cabin erupted in a flash fire before everyone could get out. Of the 46 people aboard, 23 died. 4. Dallas-Fort Worth Delta Airlines Flight 191. As Delta Flight 191, a Lockheed L-1011, approached for landing at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport on August 2, 1985, a thunderstorm lurked near the runway. Lightning flashed around the plane at 800 feet, and the jetliner encountered a microburst wind shear, a strong downdraft, an abrupt shift in the wind that caused the plane to lose 54 knots of airspeed in a few seconds. Sinking rapidly, the L-1011 hit the ground about a mile short of the runway and bounced across a highway, crushing a vehicle and killing the driver. 5. Sioux City United Airlines Flight 232. United Airlines Flight 232 was en route from Denver to Chicago on July 19, 1989, when the engine in the tail of the DC-10 suffered engine failure, severing the plane's hydraulic lines and rendering the plane virtually uncontrollable. What followed for 296 people aboard was a horrific ordeal as the captain, Alfred Haynes, struggled to land at a nearby airport. As it crash-landed, the wide-body craft cartwheeled off the runway and caught fire, and it was considered something of a miracle that 185 passengers aboard survived. The National Transportation Safety Board (NTSB) later determined the accident was caused by a failure by mechanics to detect a crack in the fan disc that ultimately was traced back to the initial manufacture of the titanium alloy material. 6. Maui Aloha Airlines Flight 243. As Aloha Flight 243, a weary 19-year-old Boeing 737 on a short hop from Hilo, Hawaii, to Honolulu leveled off at 24,000 feet on April 28, 1988. A large section of its fuselage blew off, leaving dozens of passengers riding in the open air breeze. Miraculously, the rest of the plane held together long enough for the pilots to land safely. Only one person, a flight attendant, who was swept out of the plane, was killed. The NTSB blamed the combination of corrosion and widespread fatigue damage, the result of repeated pressurization cycles during the plane's 89,000-plus flights. 7. Pittsburgh U.S. Airways Flight 427. When U.S. Airways Flight 427 began its approach to land in Pittsburgh on September 8, 1994, the Boeing 737 suddenly rolled to the left, and plunged 5,000 feet to the ground, killing all 132 people on board. The plane's black box revealed the rudder had abruptly moved to the full left position, triggering the roll. But why? U.S. Air blamed the plane. Boeing blamed the crew. It took nearly 5 years for the NTSB to conclude a jammed valve in the rudder control system had caused the rudder to reverse. As the pilots frantically pressed on the right rudder pedal, the rudder went left. 8. Miami ValueJet Flight 592. Although the FAA took anti-cabin fire measures after the 1983 Air Canada accident, it did nothing to protect passenger jet cargo compartments, despite NTSB warnings after a 1988 cargo fire in which the plane managed to land safely. It took the horrific crash of ValueJet 592 into the Everglades near Miami on May 11, 1996, to finally spur the agency to action. The fire in the DC-9 was caused by chemical oxygen generators that had been illegally packaged by Sabretech, the airline's maintenance contractor. 9. Long Island TLA Flight 800. It was everybody's worst nightmare, a plane that blew up in midair for no apparent reason. The July 17, 1996 explosion of TLA Flight 800, a Boeing 747 that had just taken off from JFK bound for Paris, killed all 230 people aboard and stirred great controversy. After painstakingly reassembling the wreckage, the NTSB dismissed the possibility of a terrorist bomb or missile attack and concluded that fumes in the plane's nearly empty center wing fuel tank had ignited, most likely after a short circuit in a wire bundle led to a spark in the fuel gauge sensor. 10. Nova Scotia Swissair Flight 111. About an hour after takeoff on September 2, 1998, the pilots of Swissair's Flight 111 from New York to Geneva, a McDonnell Douglas MD-11, smelled smoke in the cockpit. 4 minutes later, they began an immediate descent toward Halifax, Nova Scotia, about 65 miles away. But with the fires spreading and cockpit lights and instruments failing, the plane crashed into the Atlantic about 5 miles off the Nova Scotia coast. All 229 people aboard were killed. 11. Rio to Paris Air France 447. Around 3 hours into its journey from Rio to Paris on June 1, 2009, Air France Flight 447, an Airbus A330 and 3200, headed into an area of severe thunderstorm activity and was never heard from again. From an envelope-pushing altitude of 38,000 feet, the aircraft entered an aerodynamic stall before plunging into the depths of the southern Atlantic Ocean, killing all 228 people aboard. Several days later, pieces of the wreckage were spotted floating on the water's surface, but the whereabouts of the rest of the jet remained a mystery for more than 2 years, when a privately funded search located the bulk of the fuselage, bodies of the victims, and the vital black box recorders. 12. Exact location, unknown. Malaysia Airlines 370. There was no mayday call or sign of trouble when Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, a 777 carrying 239 people en route from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, dropped off the radar screens on March 8, 2014. 8 years later, it's still aviation's most agonizing mystery. The biggest question: why the plane's transponders were apparently disabled, making the jet almost invisible as it unaccountably changed course and headed south, where some experts believe it flew for up to 7 hours on autopilot before running out of fuel and crashing into the Indian Ocean. 13. Indonesia and Ethiopia Lion Air 600 and 10 and Ethiopian Airlines 302. On October 29, 2018, Lion Air Flight 610, a Boeing 737 MAX 8, plummeted into the Java Sea 13 minutes after it took off from Soekarno-Hatta International Airport in Jakarta, Indonesia. In the weeks following the crash, officials discovered the panel pining. Bound flight suffered flight control problems linked, in part, to a flaw in the new aircraft's maneuvering characteristics augmentation system (MCAs). The system mistakenly pushed the plane's nose down despite the pilot's best efforts to correct it. Thanks for watching.